an output, it will tell me currently what that is. So I can read what my alpha value, I can read what my color value is at any particular point. Luciano is saying you don't see other people on chat. Well, I mean, I don't know that anyone else right now is actually typing anything in. I've either put them to sleep or they're just they're just watching. We haven't dropped or anything, have we? I still see that we're streaming. Okay, everyone's there. All right. So one of the power things. There we go. One of the things that we can do is that we start looking at how we can combine these things. So if I say take, let's look for my dots, and keep this in mind up here.
The most generic Gashapon off-brand robot that I've ever
seen. This little entry is your search. This can definitely help in finding things that you might not remember directly how it's named or whatnot. So if I plug this into here, double-clicking on a node will open up that node, or I can turn this and I get a larger node editor that will actually have that open in the side. Myself, I like working in a slightly truncated node editor and just double click to open what I'm looking into. So what I want to do is I want to try to make this a little smaller, and let's increase our contrast. Let's go full 100 so we've got pure perfect circles. Now let's say diameter. Let's drop the diameter a little bit, something like this. Now, one of the things that you can look here is you can see, like I was controlling a diameter here, and I changed it down to 75%. I increased my contrast. All of these values are represented on the other side of the node. These are where I can plug other nodes into to modify what's inside. So if I take this turbulence, let me unplug from here and plug this color in. Let me go ahead and let me scale this down so that we can kind of get an idea of what it's looking like. Let me increase its contrast and maybe a small scale increase so I can get something that's looking like this. Now what if I were to take this then and plug it into one of these values here? Well, as we can see, my background color is black, my foreground color is white, so if I plug this into my foreground color, then now what's in this particular node is inside the circle. Alternately, if I plug it in there, then I've got the white dots on top of my turbulence. That's useful, that's interesting, but what I'm curious about is doing things like, you remember I changed my diameter. My diameter out here is a scalar. What if I plug my alpha into my diameter? Now I'm modifying that diameter value by a texture. This is where we start getting the creativity. This is where we start seeing how we can modify nodes with other nodes in somewhat of a stack across. So as we're seeing, this value is modifying a value inside of this node, and as you can see, it grays out. It gets to where I can't use it because it's disabled, because it's being controlled by another node, and then that value goes out into my in order to control my color channel of my principal shader. Everything following? I mean, I know that currently I think most of the people that we have on the particular chat are seasoned users, so this might not be the most interesting thing, at least at this particular point. But again, we're trying to target and help out the new people. that might not be comfortable with using nodes directly. So far everything's making sense, yes? So thumbs up or something in the chat maybe. I'm also getting used to the delay that I'm seeing from when I speak to when the stream actually happens. So okay, this is in surfacing. This is primarily where most people are going to be using nodes, but in 2018 we can use nodes in quite another whole raft of places now. Let me just quickly, I have this, let me drag this in and load this. This is our new volumetric lighting. This is a simple light. Let me just show you here. This is just a simple spotlight, but we have some nodes on it, and this is one of our new primitives. This primitive is actually just a sphere. This is a way of having a sphere without having geometry, and this is another another talk altogether. But what I just wanted to show you here was the nodes that are controlling this light. What we have is the light shader has luminaire, illumination, and volumetric coloring. This is a gradient that has distance as a scalar, as you can see, plugged into the input. This gradient is set up to be blue, then a little black line, then green, again a black, red, black, purple, black, yellow, black. All of these keys are set to step, so there's no smooth in, smooth out. They're just harsh lines as we go. So if I were to minimize this a little bit and turn on VPR, what this is going to show is that we are controlling this light color. It's actually more accurately the illumination color in distance away from the spotlight. And I don't think that anyone here would be confused by this particular, granted this is a simple setup, but this is very, very simple to get into. And as you can see here, if I let me just take this aside, let me grab a different gradient. I'm just going to add another one. And again, I'm just going to plug this input into here, this color into illumination color. So right now it's totally black. If I add, and keep this in mind too, that this is distance from the light. So if I take this to green and I drag this down, you can kind of see that the opacity a little bit. So let me grab another, bring that black here. So there's my black line starting. So again, if I change this to step, so I can pull this down, and we're looking at a fair throw, so I can come down here and change my end value. So if I pull this down and pull this, so very easily, and I get this so often in customer service and customer bug reports and such. They ask me, can I do this? Can I try this? Just try. There's nothing that's going to be hurt by you just opening something up, plugging something in, and giving it a whirl. Take it for a test drive. See what happens. Don't be afraid of the controls. And with VPR, it is so fast and simple to give a look to what we're actually seeing. This light has an animation, and I'm just kind of scrubbing it through to see what, as the light turns and moves and shapes around, what's happening with the colors that I've set up here in this gradient. So again, this is very simple and very easy to get into. Don't fear nodes. Give it a try. A lot of your really powerful controls are embedded in the nodes, in the node system. And if you can get comfortable with them now, then working in things like Digital Fusion and other programs that use a node influence or a node interface, they will come to you a little bit easier. The more you can get comfortable with nodes, the better off you'll be. And as you can see, we're starting to put nodes and node editors in more and more places in LighWave. So it's good to get that under control. What I want to do now is I had to change content directories to get to this particular thing. So let me change back. What I want to do now is, again, with the nodes, yes. If you want, how come volumetric objects cannot be told to be matte objects? This is currently how they particularly are. I have numerous reports on people wanting to use volumetric objects to be matte objects. So it is being looked into. It is not, just one person who is asking that question, Kelly. So hopefully, we can get that brought forth into newer versions as we move forward. This is the first version that we've ever had that had these objects. So it is one of those things that it was actually kind of a happy accident in one sense that we even got them. So we ourselves are actually finding out more and more ways that people are expecting to use them and want to use them. So this is one of those grand. Let me go ahead and, for those of you who don't know, up here under the Help menu, up here in the upper left-hand corner, we have our Submit Bug Report and Submit Feature Request. Absolutely, these are worth knowing where they are, so we can take your feature requests and take your bug reports and get them into our system so that we can handle them more properly and appropriately. CDA Live, can I ask something about rendering? We are going to be talking about that a little bit more in the second presentation. Go ahead and ask your question right now, and I'll make sure that, if it is something that's going to be covered already, or I can break script. What do you got? While he's formulating that, I'm going to go ahead and start moving toward what I had figured initially here. So I'm just going to load in something simple as a car that I want to illustrate a node use in instancing. So I've loaded in this car, and it's a simplistic car. We don't need it for anything more for this particular show. I will get to your question here in a second. So Honda Accord here, I'm going to go ahead and disable in the view, and I want to hide it and tell it not to render. One of the things that now I'm going to do is I'm going to add myself a null. And on this null, P for properties, I'm going to pop open an instancer and add an instance generator. This, I'm going to double click on, bring this in, and tell it to instance the Honda Accord. I'm going to go ahead and set it to local, and I want to see it as it actually exists. Now, a lot of times that this comes up is people want to set up a parking lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a rectangular array. I'm not doing a multi-level parking facility, and I'm just going to slide this open, and I'm going to change my Z spacing here a little bit. Now, get a few things out of my way. I did see your question. I will answer that here when I get past this, so stay tuned. I need to set this just a little bit. Now, even the most careful parking don't park that close together, so car doors need to open, and we'll just separate ourselves a little bit. Now, what tends to be the question of the day usually is, okay, I want these cars rotated randomly 90 degrees. The way we do this is we do this with nodes, and we actually do it with nodes and a gradient. So I'm going to quickly show how we can do this. So the first thing I want to do is I can't have, if I'm controlling this with nodes, I can't have this out here set to random. This needs to be uniform. I'm going to go into my nodes. I'm going to click my node, to use the nodes, and open my node editor. Now, as we can see here, I've got an input. This input is bringing in the information from my cars and my instance. And then my result is going to go into my instance generator. What I want to do is I want to control my rotation. I need to control that with a gradient, actually. Because it is a blue, and as we remember, blue is a vector, that means I'm going to need to change this. I've only got two kinds of output here. I've only got color and alpha. So what I need to do is I need to be able to change this to a vector. So again, I go to my search and I type in vec, and I find make vector. This is great. This is what I want. My vector is going to go into my rotation. I want to use my fixed random as my input, and then my alpha is going to plug into one of these values. I'm going to leave that unplugged for right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to double click this. What I want is I want to set my alpha value. Now, we're dealing with scalars, we're dealing with vectors. We're working in radians here. So I'm going to pop open my calculator on my I'm running Windows 10, and I'm going to go to View and Unit Conversion. And yes, I'm dealing with angles, and I want to change degrees to radians. And if I say 90, I come up with 1.57. Now, I know a lot of people, especially, let me move that out from behind my big ugly head so you can see what I actually did. Let it update just a touch. There we go. So, angle 90 degree, and it changes me to 1.57 radian. I'm going to need one other value, and that other value is going to be 360. 360 is 6.28. I know a lot of people, especially my wife, as soon as I start mentioning math, the eyes glaze over. So what I want to do is I want to be controlling this with my alpha. So my alpha value I'm going to set starting off at 0, and then at my end position of 1, I'm going to use that 6.28, but it's going to be 628%. Again, I don't want smooth transitions between this because I want to have them either this angle or that angle. So if I change this to step, so now I have 0 and 360. Halfway here, I'm going to go 0.5. That is where I want to do the 90, which is 1.57. In here, I put 157%. Again, step value. And now if I plug this into, say, Y, well, I'm going to get this. Plug it into X, we get that. Z, we get here. So let's go to X. And so what this is doing is this is doing a 90 degree between 0, 90, and 360. If I was to make this actually 180 instead, which I should have done in the first place, 3.14. So that is 314. So there is our 180-degree random rotation for our parking lot. Now, I know that all the parking lots that I visit, we wouldn't be this close to each other. So I'm going to change the spacing here a little bit. I'm going to grab my null, clone it, and pull to here. Then I can just grab that null, his instancer, and let's see if what we can do is we can change a little something maybe. Here I could even adjust this down to throw a few others. Instead of exactly half, I could have more one way, more the other way. Does this make sense to everybody? Again, it's one of those things too, if I go back to my original null and pop open its nulls. Again, this was set at 180. If I came in here at 0.25 and changed my alpha value to that 90, 157, 57, stepped, and in here 0.75, and this would be 270, 471. So here it would be 471, and again stepped. So now we're rotating every 90 randomly. So again, we're not looking at a very complicated node flow. This is fairly simple. All we're doing is we're changing, the only thing that makes this any kind of complicated is that we're changing our alpha, that is it's a scalar, into a vector, and we just use a make vector. Okay, random cars. So if I were to load in, I've got, let's see, cars, let's go to this, and we load him. Give it a second to wake my drive up and load. Actually, it's one of those things too that I think, let me do another thing. It's Cherokee random. So let me replace Honda Accord here. Replace. Now, I'll show you why I have this. Replace with object. Accord random. Audi S3. Replace with my S3 random. We go back to my null.
So what about
and here I'm going to, I've already got my Honda Accord, so I'm going to select these two and say add from layout. We can change this to local, and let's make both of them show texture shaded solid. So now it's randomly choosing between these three vehicles. The reason I have rand in my name is because in my surface, what we have are, I believe, I use my VPR. These are actually, I've got some on top of one another. That's why I'll turn those off and hide it. What we have is, I've got in the body of these, I have this set up so that I can load in an instance info, and again do the random coloration so that we can randomize their colors. Now let me quickly go back to CDA. question. Is it planned to bring integrated GPU rendering inside LighWave in the future? I will tell you that we have been researching it. I will tell you that we are aware that that is where everyone is wanting to go. Octane shows us that quite clearly. So I can say, yes, we are researching it. When will it be in LighWave 3D? I can't answer. It is, like I say, it's under research, and what we're trying to look and see is how we can keep what we have and add to it. Some people still want to do CPU rendering because maybe they don't have a high-end video card to handle GPU. I know I don't. My particular video card is comparatively old and doesn't have very many CUDA cores. So I know that other cards have more. So for me, on this system, doing anything with a GPU render is actually not that big of an improvement for me. I still need to work with CPU. So there's your answer for that, and glad that you asked that because it is one of those things. Yes, and there again, good point, Louis. It is important to have the option because not everyone has put together a render farm around GPUs. They have existing ones that are around CPU. So, okay, that kind of covers what I wanted to do with nodes. What I wanted to get into next was something that this came from a customer service report. I will not mention his name, not because I don't want to embarrass him, but because I honestly don't remember. What I am going to do is I'm going to set up a little something here. This is just going to be very simple, but I just want to, I need to have something to work against. So what I'm just going to do is create a disk here numerically. I don't need it to be that many. And let's go ahead and extrude this. And I want it to be fairly long so that we have some things to play with. So that's 17 meters. Let's go 30 meters. Let's go an even 1 meter radius. And let's do this. Put this back. Let's go ahead and do 2. This ought to work. Go 40, and then let me go. There we go. Now we're going. Now we're getting there. However, I need a few seconds. So let's do not so many so that we can illustrate something else. So this is a 40 meter long, and let's do this. Now, I'm wanting to not have any multi-point polys, and that looks a little bit large. Let me shrink this down. I'm holding down the control key. I grabbed H, and I'm just shrinking it down. Hitting tab because I want this to be a sub-D object. Now, I'm going to come into another layer here, and I'm going to go to setup, and I'm going to create a skeleton. In the skeleton, I'm going to pull the whole run. Getting points mode, value, Z, that was 40 meters. And this one I want to set to 0. Just as a cautionary, X, set it to 0, and Y, set it to 0. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to start splitting it. Split, 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 split. There. That's a lot of little bitty skelegons. That's wonderful. Yes, we would love to have a hybrid solution, Kelly. That is what we're looking into. And 32, goodness. So I'm going to take this X and Control V paste. So I now have some bones inside of this tube. Save this object as I'm world renowned for my naming. I'm going to call this tube. People often ask me, what should I name my object? And I always have an answer for them that is teeming with creativity. Okay, so here's what I've got. Simple tube, and right now I'm going to go ahead and scale down a little bit my grid here. I'm using the open square bracket, and I don't necessarily need to see my camera in the way. And I'm just going to do this. Now, simple, we're going to just turn smoothing on. I just want to have that on. Okay, one last setup bit. Scene editor, you remember I created all those skelegons. So I select that, set up, and convert those skelegons. So now I have my massive list of skelegons. What I am now going to talk about, now that I'm all set up and maybe a few people are asleep, I'm going to talk about this modifier stack down here. This is quite powerful. And what I want to do is I want to show you what this does, what this means. So right now I have bones active and I have subdivision active. You see the on that is checked. So everyone should be like, well, that's all well and good. That's pretty simple. I'm just going to come up here in my scene editor and I'm going to lock my tube so it's just easier for me to lasso select some bones. So I'm going to pull this around. I'm going to select over here and I'm going to pull this. Oops. I don't want to twist it. What I want to do is I want to bring it back, and I want to bring this, and I want to bring it back. So something like this, little snake. Now I have bones first and I have subdivision second. We can all hopefully agree that that is how we have this ordered. If I turn off bones, then the tube ceases to have the bones active on them. Just like if I turn them back on and disable subdivision, you can see that now, let me turn on maybe textured shaded solid wireframe, you can see that the bones, even though they're nice and smooth, now that I've turned subdivision off, that's not being applied. Now, here's where we start getting into some really creative things. For right now, I'm going to disable bones and I'm going to keep subdivision on. I want to add a displacement map. This displacement map, I'm going to add a procedural texture, and as you can see, I'm already displacing. And right now, I'm displacing on the y-axis. It's a little big, so I just want to bring this down a little bit. Let's go to 2. And again, we're doing it on the y. I'm going to copy this current layer and paste it and add to. So it's the same thing now, but I want to do in the X. So I'm doing a Y and an X, but I want to blend them. So I'm going to go 50% and 50%. So we can see some disruption. Let's increase our contrast so that we might get a little bit more out of this. Let's increase this to, let's go 50 and let's go 50. Now, if I come back into my list here, you can see that my subdivision is happening before my displacement map. I actually didn't need to add it, but I went ahead and added one. So this displacement map is happening after subdivision. Welcome car. So what I can do here is I can double click on my subdivision and let's increase this. So if I increase this number, this display subpatch level, I can see that I am affecting now more points because the subdivision is happening before my displacement map. So if I were to drag my displacement map, click and hold and drag and put it before subdivision, well, as you can see, it's now almost not even happening. But it really is. If I disable subdivision, you can see that the very low cage, the very low point cage, is being displaced. So if I turn my subdivision back on, and I take my displacement map and drag it to after my subdivision, then turn my bones back on, even though I am displacing in the Y and the X, because the subdivision is happening after this, it's not doing exactly what I want. So if I drag my bones to after, now it is. So now I'm subdividing, I'm displacing, then I'm doing my bones. Is everyone following that? So what I'm now going to do is something that this will probably help really drive it home. I'm going to add something called an effector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find, where are we here? Effector. So I'm going to add a null, items, add a null, and I'll call this effector. And I need to now go back to my tube. And this effector object prefix, but what I want is I want it as a point. I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to turn off my displacement map so that I can really kind of see what I'm working with here. So let's go point and let's do fall off and let's change our core radius. So forget how, there we go. So now we get this going. I'm going to grab that null again. I'm going to collapse this and I'm going to pull him forward. So here we go. So let me go back to my tube, go back to my effector. So I'm working on this solid core radius here, fall off distance, and bring this in here like this. Maybe that's a little too big on the hard. So bring this down, something like this. This should work just fine. So now what I'm going to do is I'll grab my null again, and I'm going to pull it out to over here. My end frame of 120, I'm going to pull this all the way down my tube and out the other end. So as I bring this back, here we go. Now again, tube, turn that off, nothing happens. So let's turn on our displacement map, turn on our bones, and turn on our effector. And even though it's going straight, you see now it leaves my tube. And that's because the effector is happening after my bones. So if I drag this, if I select this and pull this up to before my bones, now this follows the curving tube all the way around and out. order of operation that we're doing here and that we have control over in this modifier stack is really, really powerful. And this is where you would want to really pay attention so that everything that you're wanting to do, make sure that it's happening, mentally, just kind of look through here and see which is happening what, which is happening when, and what's happening before something else. So for the one customer that actually asked me, why does it matter that I have my bones in which particular order? If you're watching the stream or if you see this recording, I hope this helps. I know that I tried to communicate this to him through the customer service ticket, but that is the potential there. Let's see. I think we have here a 30-minute until this particular presentation is over. I'd like to open this for any other kind of questions. I see David Clark, when will Modeler get some updates? We have updated in 2018. We've certainly added some tools. I can, clearly show here. Let me just do a new object. We've added a number of things like that are now they give you feedback as you are doing, such as here, if I say automatic, this will give me my spacing. I can pull back. I think there have been a number of demos already done using some of these, but it is in our aim to help out the core of LighWave, the core of Modeler eventually. So, when will it get updates? It's being worked on even as I speak. Vertex normals and UVs, certainly. It is some of the things that we have that we are looking into. Primarily, when you start looking, that we are trying to work more and more to work into Unreal and Unity game engines. Things like that just come about. New displacement tools to emulate part move. There are, if you look under, I believe it's nodal motion. So if I pop open motion options here and say nodal motion, clear that out. I want to say that there were things for emulating some of the DP part move. They have, I know that we've worked with Dennis on getting some of the things sorted, and we are trying to help emulate some of the tools that we've lost because of that. So yes, we're going to be working on some of the things that, DP part move, definitely. Yes, okay, I see that David did cover some of the new modeling tools. Yes, and even in Modeler, you have even with some of your tools that we now have the ability to use textures and things to help modify. Additionally, some of our tools that are just standard stock tools to use textures, to use nodes and things like this to help even in the modeling area. Let's see, some of the things that I might even be, let's see, LighWave to Unreal. Yes, Unity and Unreal are definitely on our radar because there's a number of customers that are making games and doing things, and it's what's helping to drive our improvement of FBX and all of our input-output for working with mixed pipelines. So, you know, absolutely, this is and as David just mentioned, and as I just said, we're absolutely working on improving our FBX support and our FBX format. So I'm tempted to kind of go a little bit. Sorry for being a pest. Proper physical stock. Alexios, yes, and I will tell you directly that we have had a number of people request a physical sky, so that is certainly on the books. We actually had a potential working, but it didn't feel complete enough. So it is one of those things that we've even had, you know, in beta and in testing, something close. So that is, you know, Luciano, I mean, a lot of people would say, well, the real focus, you know, of LighWave has been very not focused. Architecture is one area. Games is another area. VFX is another area. So it is one of those things that we're hearing, and I mean, I've been logging all of the reports and all of the requests from every area, and there's obviously going to be those places that these different disciplines overlap, and physical sky is one of those. So I don't, again, I don't have a time. I don't know what version, but do know that it, again, has been researched, and we've at least done at least a first blush. We've had a look at it. So I know that there's a number of third parties that have looked at doing physical skies as well. And I know that 2018, with its new engine and its new surfacing and its new lighting and its new volumetrics and everything, kind of threw a wrench in some of that. So can you talk a little bit about custom buffers or output of images in render? That's actually in my second presentation, Kelly. So just trying to see about a little bit of a wrap up here that I could do in the next, I think is about 20 minutes, that we could revisit anything or anything else in the similar of what we've been looking at. Again, you know, I apologize, as my first one of these. I did not know necessarily how much time would be for which. So trying to keep an eye on the chat as well. I think they all just came to see me make a fool of myself, or how bad I would fall on my face. Well, David, you know, maybe it's one of those things that didn't do it on purpose, so that so that we wouldn't have so many, and so that, you know, my first one wouldn't be just a total disaster. Let's see. Sorry, in the last period, they are moving on GI, and the tool of character animation are freeze. This is my impression. Can you confirm this? I don't quite understand, Luciano. They're moving, the last period, they are moving on GI. And the tool of character animation are freeze. I really, Luciano, I am sorry, but I don't quite understand your question. We have been, you know, working directly on global illumination and improving that. We have looked at where we can improve with character animation. So I mean, nothing is quote frozen. If you're meaning, okay, Alexos, if you are accurate, Luciano, I will tell you that I kind of explained it a little bit in the beginning, that we take things in triage. For quite a bit of time, everyone was telling us that modeler was fine and that we needed to work on layout and we needed to work on our surfacing and our rendering. So we did that. During that particular timing, other things were left as they were. So it's, like I say, it's done as, you know, waves and as things progress. I can see already that as we get moving forward into, you know, interfacing more with certain other engines and certain other applications, that now that we're, render is getting, you know, the attention, that we can go back and work on, and you have to understand too that a lot of the code and a lot of the replacement and upgrading that we're having to do in phases. And what we've done this phase is we have done, you know, surfacing, we've done rendering, and we've done geometry cache and a geometry engine replace in layout. Now we can go back and work in underneath of that and bring up the animation sectors as you phrased it. It's not that we have frozen things and are not ever going to go back. I want to make that apparent. I want to make that clear. You know, I even heard a rumor at one point that someone said, you know, well, okay, that's all they're ever going to do for this particular area. That's not accurate. That's not right. You know, when we see that there are things that need addressing and more people hit that area, we focus on that area. So to say that, you know, the character animation tools and things is frozen is not accurate. So I hope that clarifies it. I hope that, you know, is the answer to what you were asking. We are not freezing tools by any means and never going to go back and reapproach it. And even you know, the modifier stack is not complete. We have things that we still want to add to it, still have the ability to add more of a different kind, have multiple subdivisions in the stack. We have plans for every aspect. So I mean, it's not stagnant. It's not that, you know, we're not going to improve anything anymore. just really, understand that. I hope you do. I hope I'm communicating that to you clearly enough. There's one aspect here that I was kind of saving for the start of the other presentation. I'm tempted to go ahead and do it because it's not much, but it's just something that I get asked quite a bit about. Let me go ahead and get into it here. So let me throw out a ground plane. I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to say this is 5. This is just a square ground plane. What this has to do with is alpha channels in images and how it might be confusing to some people. Excuse me, I'm going to turn on VPR here, and you forgive me if I go ahead and do this to just something a little bit, not totally black, but not just so white. Into my graph here, I'm going to pull this aside. I'm going to load in an image. We're going to go over here and load in. And I'm going to come here to put my name. So what I'm going to do here is we'll just use this. So this is an image. It's a PNG image. It has an alpha channel. And as you can see here in the image editor, it's enabled. So if I were to disable this or choose just the alpha or anything, I can do that here. If I map this onto this plane, so let me just go image and bring this in and drop that in color to color, and we need to go Y and auto size. Now, what I'm looking at here doesn't exactly represent what my image is, and this is where a lot of people kind of get confused. My background color right now is black. This image has an alpha channel, but it's black. So if I change my background color here, that's where I see my color out here. Initially, this is set up to be what we would consider to be like a label on a box or a label on a can or something, to that effect. So this is easy to illustrate. If I was to say throw something different. So like let me do a crumple here into the background color. So change this to green and change this to blue, so you can see my alpha channel is being held out and doing exactly what I want for that image. This is fine. This all works great. Now, here is where people start to lose it. So what I'm going to do is, instead of this image, I'm going to swap this out, and people will want to use a leaf. So let's, this is going to be UV mapped, say, onto cards that are going to be in a tree, and these now want to be the image map for my leaves on my tree. So as I had it set up here, it's doing exactly the same way as I had for the arrows of chaos. So you would then think, okay, well, fine, let me just take my alpha and plug it into transparency. Let me find transparency here. And, well, now that's not doing anything like what I wanted. And so I think what I'll do is I'll open a bug report. This is where you kind of have to think about what you're really after and what's happening here. What I have without this and this is green, or this is yellow, or this is red, or whatever, is my alpha channel is holding my image, which is in my foreground, is holding out the background color. So if I wanted, and I see this quite often, is if I want, instead, I want my alpha channel to be controlling my transparency, well, okay, that's inverted. So what I'm going to do is I'll come in here and I'll invert my alpha. Okay, well, that looks great. So perfect, I'll plug in my color. Why is it red? So again, this is where people will say it's not doing what I want, so I think I'll open a bug report. What's happening here is we've got an alpha that is wanting to go two directions at the same time because of what we're wanting to do as artists. So I see a workaround quite often. People will just copy this image node, paste it, take this alpha, plug it here into transparency, and invert this, and wonderful, now it's doing what I want. But then you have to realize, well, now, goodness, now if I change my image or if I want to change something else, I have two nodes to deal with. All you really need to do is this. This is doing right. This is the alpha is normal. It's holding out my color over my background. My alpha comes down here to transparency. This is where I need to invert it here. So I just grab an invert scalar node, plug this into here, and this into here. And now it's doing exactly what we want. I see a little bit of fringing. That's because of this red that I had. Pull that down, and that clears that up. I hope that this helps, because really what you're doing here is you're taking the alpha and you're taking it one way, then flipping it, then wanting to flip it again. And I hope that at least this simple little, need or the use of this invert node helps this particular aspect. As I say, I've gotten a few reports, and I felt it was enough to make mention of it here. John, thank you. I will say that I'm a member of the multi-node until I figured out and realized what it was and what I was doing, and so this just makes it a lot easier to deal with. So, like I say, I hope that helps somebody, and I hope it keeps people from opening that same bug report. So this is taking us. It looks like, at least from my clock, we got small node. Yes, small node helps to stop a lot of thinking. You can certainly put it that way. I'll agree with it. So I think we got about 9 minutes here. Any other short little quick questions? I mean, I'm actually noticing a bit of a lag, from what I'm doing to what's actually I'm seeing on the stream. On that note, maybe we could have the image node more like the Octane one, where you can choose between RGB alpha and the node itself. Alexios, here's the problem with that. And this is, I will tell you, this is what enters into our thinking all the time. How would you handle content that was made before that change? It's easiest, for the user just to have the flexibility to add a simple little invert, rather than us having to have maybe an additional image node that wouldn't, one that would do it the old way for old content and one to do it the new way for new content. We had talked about ourselves by having another checkbox in here as a convenience, but really, if you just use the invert node like this, you're doing the same thing, and it's clearer to see. You don't have to double click into the image node to see which way you're using the alpha. We have to really keep in mind old content, even content, from way before, with importing and things like this. Anytime we go to change any aspect of existing nodes, we have to weigh that. So we honestly, we had this discussion internally, so now the past isn't necessarily dragging us down, but it's something that we have to keep in mind. It's hard, but that's the nature of the beast. People want to be able to move forward and still use their old assets. So, but I'll tell you, we did discuss it internally about having another check or another control in the node, and really we just kind of came back to, if the users would just use an invert, we got what we need, and we don't have to change anything. So, I'll make a note that I covered that. So anything else, maybe a little 5-minute quick thing that I could either show or we could talk about? And how many people we have? I have no idea of where to even look for how many people are. 34, I guess. Is that how many people are watching? The big red number that says, "Oh, you've got 34 people." Lots of apps have channels that output on image nodes. Yeah. Parametric object, more primitives or other shapes options in the future. I will say that people have really grasped onto the parametric, the primitive objects. Who knows? It's one of those things that's kind of up in the air. Show how to use displace map images on object. Displacement. So, are you talking about? Okay, Steve. New text plan for better, easier game integration. I kind of covered already. We're working on being easy to work with in any pipeline. Unreal, Unity. This is definitely something that we have seen. Excuse me. So I'm trying to think here how to use displacement map images on an object. So here's properties. Displacement map here. Is this what you're talking about? Let's see, who was that? CDA. This is just placing them here. No, that's okay, Steve. I mean, you come in, leave. I don't know when you came in, so definitely, I know this is being recorded, so maybe catch the first part once it's posted. CDA, is this what you're talking about? I mean, really, it's the same exact as using a procedural, you just swap out, surface editor. So here, this is the displacement down here, so it's just a matter of taking a value into there, and let's see. Oh, there's one other. Turn on surface displacement, I think, is one, and then you tell it how far it's displacing. That's really the. Now, did I completely block that with my big head? If anything, you know, so automatic sizing there. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's go 10, 10, and turn on smoothing. If anything, it's, you know, the surface displacement. You just need to remember to double click on it to pull up when the, you know, the distance that your surface is being displaced. I hope that. Oh, I think I'm back. Am I back? Test, test. Okay. All I did there, I don't know if you caught it, was that I came up here in the model and toggled subpatch for that object. So that was the only thing. Like I think the missing thing is to make sure that this is checked on and double click on it to tell it how far you're displacing off of the surface. I really think that was the only thing. Yeah, short break. So I think I think this is the halfway point. I think. Someone want to wake up Steve? So I guess I stopped streaming. And you'll pick it up. So we can have a 15-minute break and come back. Okay, so I'm going to hit